I'm very excited to introduce our incredible speakers tonight, Lee Perry from Florida Rising and Luigi Guadarrama. Guadarrama. I'm learning Spanish, but I'm terrible at it. From Sierra Club, so let's give them a round.
Hi everyone, welcome. Many of you know me from Ideas for Us. I actually am the vice president of the board, and I was one of the original people to help get Ideas for Us on its feet. And now I entered into politics. And I'm so excited to share with you my personal journey and what I'm attracted to in this fight, because it is a fight. But first I'd like to introduce Luigi to talk a little bit about Sierra Club.
Thank you. So hello everybody, Luigi Guadarrama, last name optional. And I am the political director for the Florida chapter of the Sierra Club. So for folks who don't know about the Sierra Club, we are the oldest environmental organization in the United States. We were founded in the 1800s, and we are a fairly large chapter here in the state of Florida with about 250,000 members and volunteers. So if you're interested in getting involved with us, we have a lot of local groups. Feel free to chat with me afterwards. So if you're looking for the chapter, sierraclub.org/Florida, and then that's our social media right there if you want to give us a follow or a like. And our mission, rather straightforward, to explore, enjoy, and protect wild places of the earth, to practice and promote. Right ahead. Wild places of the earth, which core probably our top most important aspect of our mission, and then to practice and promote responsible use of the Earth's ecosystems and resources. Right, I'm one of the people that constantly talks about the environment and its crossover with the economy. Right, here in Florida, environment is deeply important to our economy, and that's true across Sierra Club. And one of the most important parts about how we engage in this work is our last point here: to educate and enlist humanity, protect and restore the equality of the natural and human environment, and to use all lawful means to carry out these objectives. As we were just talking before, the Sierra Club is a deeply grassroots organization. We're deeply volunteer driven. A lot of our decisions are made by volunteers. A lot of our work is driven by volunteers. And that's because of this last piece right here, right? Not only do we want to be the organization that educates you on the issues, we want to be the organization that helps plug you into a community so that you can get out there and do what you want to get done on these issues. And that's Sierra Club in a nutshell.
Yes, thank you. So then that brings us to Florida Rising. So I am the Central Florida Regional Director of Florida Rising, which is one of the largest social justice organizations in the state. And what we do is we organize in communities of color so that we can make sure that those communities that have been most disproportionately marginalized through segregation and racism are now being brought to the table, the decision-making table, and we're able to disseminate information to these communities when it comes to our rights and legislative updates and registering people to vote so we can build power. So that's my contact information. Sophia Glover is my Orange County lead organizer, but I'm currently overseeing Seminole, Orange, and Osceola County. And so we organize multiracial movements to win elections, change laws, and create a state where everyone can be safe, happy, healthy, and whole. We're a people-powered organization made up of members advancing economic and racial justice across Florida. Every individual has power, but we have more power together. Mission statement. So I'll talk a little bit about the work that we actually do. So we have an initiative called Justice on Every Block, where we break down these 5 core areas: expanding democracy, making sure everyone has access to voting rights, and making sure that a lot of these bills that are actively trying to remove communities of color's access to submitting their ballot or registering to vote, that we are educating people and making sure we stay ahead of those attacks on our democracy. Climate justice, I'm a climate activist, so this is a special place in my heart. But it's really it's an intersectional conversation with every single focus area across all of the organizations that are doing social justice work across the state. You can find a way to tie it to climate. So for me, it's an awesome way to segue people from one issue to the next. Housing justice, we're in a housing crisis right now, and a lot of that has to do with climate change. That's something that no one really talks about. We talk about corporate greed. Hello. We talk about corporate greed. We talk about gerrymandering. We talk about disproportionately affecting communities that are already struggling and removing resources from those communities or not supporting communities from the ground up. And at the end of the day, what's happening all across the world, but mostly here in Florida right now for us, is we're losing our housing access. And they're doing it intentionally. We'll kind of get into that more. Gender justice and reproductive justice. So this intersects with the LGBTQIA conversation. We won't really talk a lot about the bills that are attacking our LGBTQIA+ community right now, but if you are interested, please come and see me after, because we have an awesome caucus that is doing a lot of work in the community all across the state. And so we can talk about that another time. And then criminal justice reform. So we have committees on each of these focus areas, and so we meet people where they're at, we educate them a little bit about everything, but if you have something that falls under these 5 pillars that you really want to engage in deeper, we have an expert in each of these areas that are on staff that help track bills and educate people down to the history of each of these issues. So please let me know, I'd love to plug you in. One example of a success story that we've done here with Florida Rising specifically is the Tenants' Bill of Rights. So this was something that Commissioner Emily Bonilla really brought to the county commission, saying that people are being displaced and we need to find a way to give folks better notice, better quality of living, making sure that their rent isn't increasing by sometimes 40% over the course of one lease. And making sure that when people do have an issue with mold or crazy landlords that aren't respecting them or answering their calls, that they have somewhere to put these complaints. And so that's where we fought really hard on the ground to get the Tenants' Bill of Rights and rent stabilization voted to move forward in the last election, and it passed by over 60%. And now Orange County has an office where you can call and make these complaints and get access to legal counsel. But the state went ahead and preempted us from being able to do that. And so starting July 1st, those services that we fought for will be illegal. So that's just one example of how these types of fights are super important. But the fight doesn't stop here locally, it goes up to the state and also the federal level. So we'll talk through that as well. And if you're interested in becoming a member, please let me know. I would love to have you join our endorsement committee. We have all these awesome trainings to help you learn how to talk to the press on your issues, or learn how to talk to your legislator. We bring buses of people up to Tallahassee to do advocacy days, and we make sure that you're fully equipped to tell your story and align it with the different bills that we're trying to stop. So that's what we become members. So let's talk about this event. So we're going to talk about some really hard themes. We're going to talk about some things that not everybody is really ready to hear. And so what I want to preface everyone, I want to give everybody like a disclaimer, like a cautionary disclaimer, that if you need a mental health break or something, feel free to either step out of the room or just let us know. I'll do a funny dance, I'll do something to break the ice. But not everybody is able to tune in and be like politically engaged at that level. So I just want to give everybody the opportunity to know that like we are a family in this room, we're going to work through these things together, and it's not hopeless because we have power by organizing with each other. Also, the format is, I'm going to kind of touch on some of the things. These are not the only bills that Florida Rising follows, nor Sierra Club. These are just some of the bills that we've been tracking and historically paid attention to. There's many more, and there's many more that intersect with some of the other work that Florida Rising is all about. So if you would like to have a deeper dive on any of the other themes or any of the other policies, please let me know. We're just going to give you a taste on some of the policies around energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. Okay? Awesome. And ask questions and make grimaces and grunt and curse, that's fine. This is a safe space. So first thing that I think I want to talk about, and I'd love to pass it over to you, is follow the money. How does money influence our electoral process and our democratic process when it comes to legislating and drafting these bills? One of the things that I wanted to bring up as an example was the net metering bill, the solar net metering bill that happened last year, where there were basically utility companies that were writing these bills to stop us from having solar independence on our roofs. We, as a people, at this place, America, one of the most privileged countries in the entire world, have the ability to tap into our beautiful sunshine and create our own energy on our own rooftops. But because we're in Florida and there's a lot of corruption, and I'm going to use that word only when I need that word, so a lot of corruption where these utility companies basically have a louder voice in the ear of our elected officials, and they're very concerned about too much solar. There's too much solar, then that means we're producing more energy, and we want to sell it back to the utility and make money for the energy that we're generating on our roofs. Utility companies did not want that. And so we almost lost our ability to do net metering, but then the governor vetoed it. I'm very skeptical as to why he vetoed it and whether or not this will actually come back. But it's just, to me, it stands out as one of those bills that is corporate greed. You might as well just put these utility companies in office, right? Do you want to share anything on that?
Yeah, and first off, through the course of the energy section, you might catch me asking a question to this young woman over here, Mrs. Marquez. She is our Beyond Coal organizer here in Orlando, doing absolutely magnificent, marvelous work. So if you want to get involved, please talk to Marquez. But net metering. So when we say corruption, we do quite literally mean corruption, right? FPL very literally wrote this bill. I don't mean like, oh, FPL like took meetings with Senator Bradley and said this is what we would like. No, Senator Bradley literally got an email with a PDF that said this is the bill that we want, and she introduced it. So we very, very literally mean corruption here. We quite frankly thought that the net metering thing was going to come back this past session. Thankfully it didn't. Part of the reason that we think that it didn't was the best, and even though it's a little crass way that I can put it, is we really kicked their ass. Okay? Thousands of phone calls went up to Governor DeSantis. And those phone calls said, this is disrespectful to taxpayers, this is disrespectful to homeowners, you're already screwing over homeowners with the property insurance crisis. This is tens of thousands of jobs. And we don't just mean like minimum wage jobs, we mean good middle class jobs for folks that don't necessarily have college degrees. This is something that is deeply beneficial to Florida's economy. We should be investing more in solar, particularly rooftop solar, not less. We shouldn't be preventing folks from putting solar on their rooftops. It's also a bit of a freedom issue, as you kind of alluded to, right? If you want to put rooftop solar on your home, you should be welcome to put rooftop solar on your home. So right, it was kind of a very obvious, do this and you are going to get slaughtered at the polls. Unfortunately, that argument worked. I do agree. I think that it was self-preservation.
Yeah, in retrospect, since he just announced that he's running for president, this makes perfect sense as to why he would do it. Don't trust a good thing when it comes from these people.
Right, like why would you destroy tens of thousands of jobs, millions of dollars in Florida's economy, right? The majority of these solar developers that we mentioned here are small businesses, right? These are not large multinational conglomerates. There are a few that are like big state or rather national entities, but quite a few of them here in the state of Florida are small mom and pop shops, right? We had stories from veterans, right? They came back, they wanted to invest in a business, they had some contracting experience, and they became solar contractors, right? So Thankfully, we killed this. I agree. We don't necessarily expect that this is going to remain dead. We're still on defense. But yeah, we managed to shut this down, and if it comes up again, we're going to shut it down again.
And so just what's the biggest difference between 2021 and right now? DeSantis is running for president, right? So, you know, he's obviously gearing up to heighten his profile. And so I feel like a lot of the bills that we're seeing this year are a reflection of what he's trying to show the world. It's like he's punishing us to show the world what he wants to do on a nationwide scale. So deep breath in. We're going to talk about this year. What happened this year? All right. I don't know if you wanted to talk through this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is the right bill number.
Oh, it's not?
I don't
Okay,
remember what the bill number is.
This is literally copied and pasted from.
Yeah. So the thing is that with this bill, I think it might have 258 or something, but irrelevant. This bill actually had like some very decent bones to it, as you can see in this beginning sentence right here. But we wanted to start with this bill because it, frankly, it touches on something that we noticed was a big trend this session, which is, as you can see, the big problem is that what this did was it started to limit the amount of liability that utilities have after a horrific event like a hurricane. And we also have Hurricane Ian,
Yeah.
right? And that's only going to continue as the climate crisis gets worse. There were a lot of backroom deals that were attached to either decent bills or bills that weren't really that bad, and they would attach them in last second. We managed to kill a few. There are a few that we didn't manage to kill, and there are far more examples of this that we're going to cover, right? This was not the only example where there was a backroom deal attached onto some normal bill. And this is a new strategy, right? This is the way that they kind of managed to get things through a little more quietly, right? Because when you see this, emergency shelters, allowing them to get built on private property, you might think that's a good thing. We need more emergency shelters, and then suddenly they sneak in a little poison bill, and all they sell you is emergency shelters, private property. Who wouldn't want that? Why wouldn't you want that? For the yippies in the room, right? ADU, stuff like that, right? Like, yeah, you want that. But they sneak things like this in.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's a very calculated, chaotic mess up there, right? There's so many bills going on that even the best representative, unless you're like Representative Anna Escamani working from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. every single day, unless you're like that, or you have lobbyists that you can trust who are going to walk you through these bills. There's so many bills, you can't read them all and comb through all of them. Now that we have a super majority, which means we have more Republicans in the House and Senate than we do Democrats by so much to the point where we couldn't really make a dent in a lot of these bills. What they're doing is they're flushing us with so much, it's hard to organize on the ground. You know, from my perspective, I do the door knocking, I'm the one doing the community meetings, I'm the one trying to educate people, and we have sister organizations like Florida Immigration Coalition and all these other groups in the community. It felt like every single week was a damn emergency, and we were trying to scramble from press conference to door knocking to phone banking to call the governor's office. I have a bus going up to Tallahassee. No, I have a bus going up to Tallahassee. Can you call 100 members and get them to go? Because there was so much on fire that sneaking these little last-minute amendments was another way, another strategic way to do more harm and damage to us. So it's all calculated mess. Oh, the Public Service Commission. Maybe you can give us a little history on how they work.
So Raquel is one of the people that deals with the Public Service Commission quite a bit. Basically, the Public Service Commission is, it's kind of in the name, right? They oversee for every utility in the state of Florida, right?
They oversee every utility, municipal utilities like OUC, the Orlando Commission utility. Still has like some jurisdiction locally because they're a municipal utility, But yes, so like every utility has, for example, every 10 years, they do like a 10-year site plan where they show like their plans, what's going to look like, what's going to be their energy portfolio and stuff like that, has to go through the Public Service Commission. Municipal utilities can get away with certain stuff, I know put it on a 10-year site plan, but especially investor-owned utilities like Duke Energy have to absolutely go through like every rate hike or every like, it has to go through the Public Service Commission.
Right.
But I'll let you talk about the corruption.
Right. And we do not use that C word lightly, okay? That's a real word that we use when we really mean it, as I keep saying. But before you go on that, we like layers of accountability in our democracy. It seems bureaucratic and it seems frivolous when you add it all up and you say, like, can we just get things done? Why is government so slow? Sometimes there are other measures to make sure that corruption stays out of our process. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the PSC is one of those entities that doesn't really, subscribe to that. The reason being is it's pretty stacked with allies of the utilities. FPL in particular, I think, is what we always like to say, right? Yeah, FPL in particular, and that's on purpose, right? Whenever they want to get a rate hike through, they have to go through the PSC, and so these are the people rubber stamping effectively. Do you have like a percentage of how often rate hikes get approved by the PSC? It's pretty often.
I mean, it's pretty, they did one last year where I think Duke is raising 13% of their utility bill, right? Because the price of gas has spiked so much, so they just go through it, The thing is, the Public Service Commission board, or like the people, the commissioners get appointed by the government.
Right.
And these utilities are in bed with the government.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had a cookie jar and you appointed people to watch guard at that cookie jar to make sure people weren't stealing your damn cookies, right? Well, then imagine if you put a bunch of cookie monsters on that board. They're just taking as many cookies as they want out of the jar. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, if you want to know why FPL invests so much in not only were they like a major donor to Governor DeSantis' campaign, as we were talking about Senator Bradley when we were talking about net metering before, they, I don't remember the exact numbers of this, so somebody might have to look it up to verify. But shortly after, she got that email from them with the, this is the bill we want, they were like, awesome. They donated $10,000 to one of our campaign committees, right? We all remember the ghost candidate scandals,
yep.
Right? FPL, and it's because there's a lot of money involved. These are the people that decide, or rather approve, whether or not they're allowed to charge you more money for everything that they do, right? And sometimes they make horrible decisions, right? As Raquel alluded, right, fracked gas is incredibly expensive. Other folks might know fracked gas as quote-unquote natural gas. That's not real, right? It's fracked gas, it's methane, it's dirty stuff.
Clean coal.
Yeah, it's not real. Renewable natural gas, that's not a real thing. That's just what they like to call it. It's incredibly expensive. We did the math, right? If you were to power your home with fracked gas, it'd be roughly equivalent to powering your home with gas from the pump, right? So it's imagine driving down. We all know how expensive gas is. Imagine driving down every month to the Wawa and filling up a giant container to power your home for the next month. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And they offset those costs to you. They make very bad investment decisions, and they offset those costs to you because they don't want to pay the price for their stupid and unclean decisions. And these are the people that approve that question.
Does the Sierra Club have members or delegates that attend the Public Service Commission meetings in Tallahassee?
I don't know that we have folks that attend meetings. That would be you or Brooke, and I don't think anybody attends the meetings physically, right?
I think you used to be able, you can do public comment at a Public Service Commission meeting. Right. I'm sure we are our members are really engaged.
Yeah.
And they go and do some public comments at the Public Service Commission. One big thing, for example, where I don't know if y'all know, like Susan Glickman, I used to work for SAYS. There's this, I don't remember what it really stands for, but like the FICA docket when it comes to energy efficiency and what utilities set up their rates of energy efficiency for the year. You can do public comment on stuff like that, it depends on whenever they open it, but for like big, like the FICA docket and stuff like that, they do public comment. We're doing it virtually. I don't know if they're doing it in person, but you have a lot of groups like SAYS, I'm sure members attend to those. I'm sure Florida Rising also probably sends out a bus up there as well as maybe, so.
There's a lot of different groups. How many of you guys have heard of ghost candidates before? Raise your hand. So these utility companies are literally scouting people in different districts and paying them off to run for office to offset our chances as progressive people who actually give a damn about people's longevity and future here, so that they can move votes and basically offset elections. And that's been happening for a long time, and now like all these scandals are making headway, investigations are happening, they're threatening reporters, they're stalking reporters, and making it really, really hard for us to have a fair shake at our democratic process. So I just wanted to make sure we clarify that.
And that's not an exaggeration, by the way. They do literally have like private PI firms like following reporters around.
Yeah, and so what I noticed is, I worked at the county commission for a while with Commissioner Nicole Wilson. Now I'm getting into, more statewide politics. And so I noticed that every time that a local government does something great, the state then has to reprimand them. So this is an example of one of those bills where the city of Gainesville was trying to become more independent. There was a lot of things they were trying to do in housing, and it sounds like for this bill, they basically were trying to pave the way to remove local control of utilities by creating a board over the Gainesville utility.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for folks that don't know what GRU stands for, I follow a lot of the news of what's going on in Ukraine, so every time I see GRU, I think of like Russian intelligence. GRU stands for the Gainesville Regional Utility. They have no association with the Russian government back, no. But what happened here was Chuck Clements, he is the second in command in the House. They introduced a bill that basically gives the governor an appointed board that oversees GRU, right? They had a lot of excuses around debt and mismanagement and things to that effect. We all know what it was, right? It was a power grab. Gainesville's relatively blue. It's a college town, right? We are literally in UCF, right? Gen Z tends to vote pretty blue. It's something to the effect of what, damn near 40 points, right?
Or as an MPA, which I noticed is one of the fastest growing parties that people are signing up for.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? We're a nonpartisan organization, but it's just the fact that the governor is not a member of the party that Gainesville typically votes.
So they must be punished.
Yeah, and this is one of the ways that they punish them, right? They take over their utilities. And when we say they're taking over their utilities, I don't just mean like electricity, I mean water, right? Gas, et cetera, et cetera. They're taking it over just for the sake of doing so, right? There's no very real reason to do so.
Yeah.
Didn't the utilities have a huge amount of debt?
Yeah, we worked through the amount of debt that GRU has, and it's still not enough, right? The frank answer is, it's one of those things where GRU can do better in certain respects, and we've constantly said that, right? A lot of utilities, if we're still in here, a lot of utilities could do better in a lot of respects. It's very hard to be perfect, but that's no excuse for the government taking something over, right? We know why.
That's the excuse they use, though.
Yeah, that's the excuse they use.
Yeah, they want to remove their power.
Yeah.
Wait, I have a question, or I guess a comment actually. Like, I was born in Venezuela, and I feel like there's a history there of like government control or energy production. Like, I don't think I've ever talked to a certain like, doesn't this sound like socialism to you? Like, like nationalization, like it's like mini nationalization. Like, I don't know. something I think we should do.
Yeah, and this isn't like a Sierra Club position, this is like me taking out my hand speaking just as like a political operative position, right? Where, yeah, if I literally had my Sierra Club hat, I'd take it up. But yeah, that's right, it's undeniable that the governor is taking more and more authoritarian steps, and then turning around and calling everybody else authoritarian, right? Our big position was Gainesville should be allowed to manage their own utility. And the governor said, I want to manage that utility. Right? Our whole thing on net metering was people should be allowed to invest in clean energy for themselves. And the government said that they didn't want to do that, right? The government wanted to interfere with that.
Right.
They constantly attack freedom, right? Whether it's the freedom to vote, whether it's the freedom to make your own energy choices, whether it's the freedom to, right, of local governments, local elected governments, right? These are people that, or these are governments that people voted for. They tried to interfere with them, and that was another trend this session. And there are more bills that we're going to get into that touch on that exact theme, right? The attacks on local freedom and individual freedom.
Yeah, the fights of what's happening to Disney are just a reflection of what our state government is trying to do to local governments that don't typically swing in the red direction and during electoral season. So this is one that you wanted to talk about.
Yes. So
Some good news.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, right, there's a lot of heavy and unfortunate stuff in here. There was some decent stuff that happened too, and that decent stuff was more often than not stopping something bad. Investments in natural gas infrastructure, the fracked gas that we were talking about, methane, that's something that we managed to put a stop to. There were a few bills that tried to create tax breaks and incentives and would provide utilities money back if they invested in fracked gas infrastructure. The excuse was jobs, right? They would say something to the effect of, the gas is going to float up into the atmosphere anyways. We're putting it to use. We're creating jobs. That's not really true, right? They would like to say things like, around wastewater plants, we basically capture all of the bad air, right? All of the bad gas that would go up into the atmosphere, and we capture it. None of it gets out. None of it gets out. Have you ever driven past a wastewater treatment plant? You can smell it from 2 miles away, right? There's no way that they're actually capturing all of that. They're lying through their teeth in the same way that the methane is getting through all of their infrastructure. So we managed to stop that. As I mentioned before, right, it's extremely expensive, right? This fracked gas is not cheap. It's not cheap for you, the ratepayer, but they want to do it because they can turn a profit on it. They want to do it because utilities want to do it because they can turn a profit on it. Our friends at the state legislature want to do it because they can get some of that sweet, sweet money from fossil fuels.
Everybody know, raise your hand, everybody know what fracked gas is? So, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so fracking is, I'm pretty sure this is accurate. Yeah, most of the gas that you get in the United States, I'm not talking about gasoline, right? I'm talking about the so-called natural gas, comes from fracking. The way that they do it is they pump, it's hydraulic fracking. They pull this gas out of like aquifers, and they use these pumps to do so. You can find the most egregious cases. I wish I would have put a slide with the video of it, right? You can find cases where, as a result of pumping gas out of these aquifers, it gets into water, right? And so people can quite literally light their gas or their water on fire, right? They open up the tap, they light a lighter, and there's just flames coming out. It looks kind of cool, but you don't want to drink that. And that's the stuff that happens. In other instances, one of the other big issues that we have with fracked gas is the molecule itself is not very nice to deal with. It leaks, it moves everywhere. So right, it's not like they're taking this gas, putting it in a bucket, and then taking it to you. It leaks all over the place. It's very inefficient. It gets into the atmosphere, and it's a pretty egregious greenhouse gas. And then when you burn it, it doesn't burn clean. It still produces fossil fuels. And did you have?
Yeah, I wanted to say that for the state of Florida, it's important to note that we're a peninsula. We don't produce fracked gas, so the piping to bring the fracked gas here also makes it more expensive. what do we produce? We are the sunshine state, you know? So it makes it even more expensive, or the price is more volatile for us here in Florida
Yeah.
compared to other places in the United States. And it makes it more invasive to our natural lands because they have to break the ground and create pipings. That's where what's the name? The treble blade pipeline.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big issue.
Louis, you said you're interested in the business end of things.
Huh?
To me, I don't understand for years why Florida is sending money out of state that could stay here if we produced our own electricity. Like, don't the conservatives in our legislature understand that that's money that's leaving the state?
Well, some of it comes back in their pockets, that's why they care so much, right?
Well,
They get a little cut, right? Your money leaves the state, my money leaves the state, all of us, our money leaves the state, right? It doesn't get pumped back into our economy.
But there's nobody using that argument to say, hey, this is Florida's money, this is our economy being hurt.
We're starting
In
to.
the legislature.
You know, BP knew that climate change was a huge threat way before it ever made nationwide news. So they could have innovated right then and said, okay, well, if this is eventually going to be bought by the public, let's invest and become the leaders in renewables.
Yeah, they all knew
But
that.
instead they decided to bury the information and just continue as is and strip all of the planet of our, fossil fuels and
Put a
continue.
sun on the
And
logo.
spend tons of money flooding our political system with contributions so that we have more corrupt leaders and it's very expensive to be rich. They spend so much money causing disinformation campaigns rather than just being the leaders in solar 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Is anybody suing them like Shell is getting sued in the Netherlands? I think that's a Dutch company.
Raquel had her hand up.
I just also wanted to mention that when we talk about distributed generation, like rooftop solar versus frac gas, so when you put a solar panel in your house or you do a community solar farm, like that community is producing their own energy. In the state of Florida, it's illegal to just like, for you to use that energy, it goes immediately back to the grid. So utilities fight to have control of your energy. So we're getting into the topic of like energy democracy. Once there's like distributed generation across the state of Florida, you're basically taking away the power to a certain extent from the utility of them owning where the energy comes from and being able to go through the Public Service Commission to whenever to raise your rates,
But they have solar farms. They're getting cheaper energy. But
Yeah,
they're raising
right.
our rates.
Right, and they're using also, like, in the case of what you see, using frac gas as bridge fuel and becomes a stranded asset in the long term, because at the end of the day, it's so expensive that ratepayers are the ones that are going to be paying for it, so that's also why they hate clean energy, because you can have it on your roof.
Yeah, it's a small business
Yeah.
that puts it on your roof, and then the utility has to pay you money for it,
Yeah,
right?
This is basically the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this one.
Um,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, this is basically the same.
same thing, local freedom.
Local freedom, preemption basically means that they, at the state, are telling local governments what they can and cannot do by causing these preemptive bills. Yeah, it's kind of like saying the same ones over and over again.
A lot, yeah. and-
Yeah, it's just the same thing. They're just trying to really regulate and limit what we can and cannot do and what we can and cannot account for, energy-wise, so I just wanted to kind of move forward.
Wait, quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
So for that bill in particular, like the energy regulation one, so if we, for some reason, we're like, we're really convinced about like renewable energy, or even solar, whatever, something super clean, and we're like, we're gonna do this, the state should be like, no, you're not. Like if the utilities want you to use
More or less.
natural gas, we're awesome.
Yeah.
And it would be something more to the effect of, going back to the affordable housing,
Preemption bill.
ordinance, that
Yeah.
Florida
Bill of
passed.
Rights and Rent Stabilization.
imagine if we all said, you know what, we want a local law that requires OUC to invest significantly more in solar. Goes to the ballot, we all vote for it, 60-40, it passes. We're all very excited, we're gonna get all this solar produced, it's gonna be very good for the air, it's gonna be good for the local economy. The government, if they were to preempt something like that, would basically say, no, you're not.
Right.
We have ultimate authority. And they're allowed to do that legally, at the moment, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and some of these things are not even like constitutional. It's a headline that will help the governor accelerate his public profile. And so that when he runs for office, even though most likely a lot of these bills we're seeing being fought in the courts already, and a lot of them are being stalled in the courts, it just helps him build his brand of what type of hateful BS he's gonna do if he were to be president of the United States.
Socialism.
So let's breathe. We got through energy, we have a few more to get through. So like I said, I worked for Orange County Commissioner Coles, and one of the big things that we worked on was a summer fertilizer ordinance. Now let me tell you what this bill is taking away from you. That was countless hours of phone calls, of community meetings, of people like you who care about the manatees and care about what we're doing to our lawns, coming out, spending your time, your gas, your energy. That was your tax dollars going to staff at the county and legal counsel to write that ordinance, and all the public time. And we got a very, no pun intended, watered down fertilizer ordinance here. Could have been stronger, just for the state to basically preempt our ability to enforce that summer fertilizer ordinance.
So the way that this thing works, going all the way back to the very beginning, is this is another one of those back routines. We literally know who was behind this. This was True Green, so if you ever see those True Green fertilizer things flying around, this was them. Yeah, they literally hired, their lobbyist is a former speaker of the Florida State Legislature. They hired them to walk around and introduce this in the budget. They tried to introduce something far worse and far more permanent in a different bill, and we managed to kill it. Why? People like their fertilizer ordinances. Why? Because as you can see up there, right, it causes algal blooms and red tide, not the fertilizer ordinances, the fertilizer. I don't know if anybody here has either dealt with the algal blooms and the red tide or has seen the algal blooms and the red tide. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's bad for your health. It's bad for the economy, right? We are a big tourism economy. People like to visit our beaches. If the beaches are piled up with dead fish, who wants to visit? Nobody wants to visit. People quite literally decide not to visit Florida when they see images of dead fish. And when we're talking about tourism, we're not talking about like some small industry in Florida. We are talking about the largest industry in the state of Florida. Over 1 million jobs affected by things like this. When we're talking about net metering and right, tens of thousands of jobs, this is times 100, right? Very big problem, backroom deal. They decided to add it in the budget. So what they did was, I'm not going to go too much into the details of like the implementing bill versus the budget because we'd be here for a bit, but they decided to, as you can see here, they attached an appropriation, $250,000 for a study. And the excuse was, we can't do these ordinances over the course of the next year because we need to study the impact of these ordinances first. We have 30 years of data that says that these ordinances are effective, but they decided that they need another study. And $250,000 is not enough for a year-long study across the state to determine this. It's fake, right? They're preempting things is what they're doing with this.
Well, they bought the University of Florida too, they installed the president.
Right.
I was gonna say, take my Lee Perry hat off, or excuse me, my Florida Rising hat, and my Lee Perry hat is on.
That's what it
How deep does the corruption go? When even our institutions that we pay tuition money into are being basically indoctrinated by these Republicans and being used as a political tool just like other colleges throughout the state. And, University of Florida, they have great research, they have great people, they're good people, but they're also profit-driven, and they also have a lot of, they're basically an arm to continue to do things like this,
So can the Sierra Club and Florida Rising issue a travel advisory like the NAACP when things get, the algae blooms get?
Well, what we're gonna get hit with here pretty soon is sargassum, which is also affecting us.
Yeah, it's happening, yeah.
Yeah, sargassum still, if folks are seeing sargassum right now, it still hasn't peaked yet. I believe it's gonna peak mid-July, if I remember correctly. Hopefully it doesn't peak like next week and you guys are all like, But we don't know how big the impacts of sargassum are going to be. And we don't want to, right, we are a very fact-based organization, we don't want to exaggerate. So we don't know how bad it's going to be, but it could be significantly worse than you might think of, right? Everybody here is like, there's a big patch of seaweed that's going to hit Florida that's twice the width of the United States, and you're kind of like, that's kind of funny, very Florida, if that would happen. But no, it could genuinely be bad. There is a patch of seaweed twice the width of the United States coming to Florida. We've been looking at case studies on sargassum, history of what happened. We've been talking to scientists. We think that this could be very bad. We don't know that it will be yet, but this is the type of thing that would affect that.
And, we could have had a ton of bills addressing those issues.
Yeah.
But instead, they decided to use their time in the state legislature doing stuff like this.
We have real problems.
We have real problems that we could be addressing, but instead they're actively trying to undercut us and make as much profit out of the state while they still can. Leave everyone who's poor, or even some of the new people who are affluent coming here spending their life savings, they're just trying to leave us all. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites.
This was one of the ones that they brought last year,
Yeah.
right? And then they brought it back. Because I like had a panic attack. when I saw
And
it.
we killed it.
Thank you.
It got killed pretty early on. This one, I love this one, not because I love the bill, I hate the bill. What this would have done is it was another preemption situation, but this would have been for water quality stuff all across the board. It would have been a little more permanent. It was a representative, the representative that introduced this bill quite literally introduced it for personal reasons, not policy reasons. I want to claim it was Hernando County. I hope I'm not wrong. In Hernando County, they wanted to build this is 100% real. They wanted to build a boat ramp, a concrete boat ramp, into their waterway from their backyard. They weren't allowed to because of local ordinances, and they were upset about the fact that they didn't get their precious boat ramp. And so they introduced this bill to repeal those things, just out of personal reasons. It made the news. We weren't the only ones that heard about this. It made the news. It hit quite a few people. And so it managed to die because it's absurd. But that's the type of thing that these people do.
Well, now the EPA.
Huh?
Now the
SCOTUS
Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just tried to, well, they just accomplished diminishing the EPA's authority over wetland protections.
Water is not wet, apparently, right? We can't
No,
regulate wetlands.
we finally have the answer to that debate.
Yeah, the Supreme Court answered it.
Oh wow, I don't know why this looks like that. It's a little wonky.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to tie in the right to clean water here. So there's a couple bills that I wanted to highlight. So this bill, basically this bill died, but it would have made it harder to pass ballot initiatives, and by increasing the amount of petitions you would have to submit from 60% of voters to 66.7%. And it would have made it way harder for like the right to clean water ballot initiative, because we would have had to have more capacity and more ballots, petitions collected and submitted. So I tie this into water because right now we do not have legal right as human beings to basically defend ourselves in court for a right to clean water. So when we talked about the fracked gas, Like, if you did turn on your faucet and light a lighter and it caught on fire and you wanted to sue, that corporation would have more legal standing in court than you would as an individual, even if your child is poisoned. So what's happening in Flint, Michigan, if it were to happen here, like, we wouldn't have the ability to really fight that. So that's why the right to clean water petition is so important. And so what happens when you try to do a good thing? They try to make it harder for us. And so it did die, but I do have a feeling that this will be coming back, especially since, and I have these in the back, we have the 6-week abortion petitions, the abortion healthcare access petitions here with us as well, because there was another terrible bill to limit our ability to have reproductive equality and healthcare access for all people. And so I just wanted to kind of tie that together and make sure that you all know that there is another access to democracy through these ballot initiatives. And it's super important for you to get involved and to sign these. So we have copies here, if you wanted to wave them. Right to clean water. How far along are we?
We're at like 55,000, and actually we have so many supporters around the state now. We have a lot of them sitting in people's living rooms and in different offices that have to still be collected. So we think we're way further than that, but we're on this scale, and my ask is, if you have not already signed, please sign. If you are comfortable signing, take 5 more and get friends and family to sign. And do the same thing with the abortion if that's something that you're passionate about, because that's the only way to get this. Our bill is ahead in terms of petition count than they are, because they started later. The only way to do this is through the network effect. We have got to get every person, if every person gets 5 people to sign, and then those people all get 5 people to sign, this is a snap for us to do. And we know that we have the votes to pass it. We just need to get the petition signed, so.
We deserve clean water out here, right? Okay, so I want to talk about food. So this was a bill that our partners with Florida Immigration Coalition were working diligently to pass, and unfortunately this bill died. But how many of you are familiar with farm workers and farm worker justice fights? It's like a huge percentage. So the farmers obviously own the land, they're the ones making the highest margins and profit off of the food, but the actual farm workers are the ones that are in the fields and don't really have any access to any type of rights. Right now, this bill is basically trying to give them the basic right to have key illness prevention mechanisms installed on these farms. You know, these are individuals that are wearing diapers way out in a 25-acre field because they can't get access to a bathroom. These are people that are disproportionately being affected by kidney disease and liver damage because they're holding their bodily fluids all day, and they're trying so hard to just make the numbers that they need to in order to get pennies on the dollar for the food that we eat so that they can have access to some standard of living.
And this is a bill that we supported as well. When we say basic, we mean basic.
Like an umbrella in the shade.
Yeah, it was like if the temperature was a certain was like above a certain point, there's like extra breaks in like the shade or like an air conditioned area, certain amount of like water required for folks, and then like heat stroke slash what's the other one? Heat. The other one, the one that's slightly
Exhaustion.
Heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion recognition, right? Like it wasn't even like first aid, it was more of like a recognize the signs.
Yeah.
Heat exhaustion. That's how basic this was. That's how insanely basic this thing was. The reason I want to touch on this a little bit more is there's a concept that doesn't get talked about quite enough, and we at the Sierra Club are actually trying to do a better job of talking about it. And that's environmental justice, right? When we talk about heat illness prevention, you might be thinking this is like a labor issue. Why does the Sierra Club care? As climate change gets worse, temperatures are going to get worse, and there are communities that get impacted significantly more than others. We call those frontline communities. Right, farm workers are a frontline community. They're the ones that are already bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And it's deeply important that we make sure and by we, I mean like environmental advocates, that we make sure that we advocate for them and that we get them the protections that they need so that they are safer through the course of this. At the risk of just kind of giving a big gut punch to everybody's mental health at the moment, some of the effects of the climate crisis are inevitable. They're coming, right? They're already here. These are the folks dealing with that right now. And so there is a certain amount of mitigation on the justice side, for making sure that people are thriving and safe through the course of this.
Do we still have protected or helped undocumented workers?
I believe it was just like very basic workplace requirements. I don't think it touched on immigration status at all, which is why Flick supported it.
So like, you might be thinking, wow, we just want to give people like basic access to these tools so that they don't get heat stroke. Well, what about how much fertilizer and pesticides they're being exposed to on a regular basis? What about the fact that many of them are living like 16 people in one shack without any air conditioning? What about the fact that they don't really have access to healthcare or transportation? Many of them are being trafficked into our communities. I mean, we're talking like Apopka, we're talking Ocoee. This is not like some other country. This is not like, some other state. This is happening like very, very close to us. And we can't even do, the basic things that we need to make sure that they have access to these workplace support. So
Insanely basic
it's
stuff.
insanely basic. And that ties us into the immigration bill. So this I decided to tie in because a lot of you might be seeing TikTok videos of empty construction sites and empty farms where there's like no workers. And that's because after a hurricane or in our fields or on our construction sites, a lot of those folks are undocumented folks. A lot of the people that are doing voter registration across the state are undocumented folks. They're the spine of our economy, they're the spine and spirit of our communities. They're part of what makes Florida incredible. And yet, probably because our governor's trying to run for office and some people, they vote for someone because they're like, that person's gonna help me, but other people vote for people because that person's gonna make life worse for someone else that I can blame for the reason why my life is the way it is. And that's exactly what this immigration bill is doing. It's giving our state a platform to target undocumented fellows, even though we need undocumented people here to work with us, and we need to give them rights so that they stay and they help build our economy.
Haley further restricts undocumented immigrants who are attorneys from practicing law. Not even undocumented immigrants, because undocumented folks cannot take the bar, but DACA, so the dreamers, the people that came in as kids and have some sort of like documentation, but they're not considered residents, or they're at the mercy of what's the next president going to do. Those are the ones that are not permitted.
Yeah, thank you, that's a good correction. So they're at a place now where they're doing like checkpoints on our streets. I mean, this is like Germany right now, you know what I mean? Like this is something that should be scaring us, because if they can do it now to our migrant folks, they can do it to us later. God only knows when they're gonna stop. And so I don't know if you wanted to add more, but.
Yeah, right. I think that, again, the climate crisis, there are going to be impacts that we're going to feel, and some that we're already feeling. Climate refugees are a real thing.
Right.
And climate refugees are only going to continue, right? It's important that we figure out how to deal with these things in a humane way, right? These are people, right? These are people that are trying to find a better life for themselves and for their families and for their loved ones. That's something that each and every single one of us wants. That's something that I want. That's something that all of you want. That's something that all of you want.
Yeah.
It's that basic. That's it, right? That's the only thing that we're asking for here, right? Is a recognition of the fact that there are worse things coming, and that we want people to be treated like human beings.
And I'm pretty sure, I was just in a organizing, training with some members of FLIC, Florida Immigration Coalition, who were saying that some of these bills are handwritten by the private prison industry because they basically want to fill our prisons. And so felonizes anyone who transport undocumented people into the state of Florida, like, that is very common. They're trying to scare people. I mean, look, requires hospitals to collect immigration status from patients. That is unheard of. Now people are gonna stop going to the hospital because they're scared of getting deported and being hunted. Like,
That violates HIPAA law.
right. And so some of these bills, I don't even think they're enforceable. They're just doing it to scare people, so they leave. So that now he can say, look what I did to save my state, because I guess immigrants are more of a threat than climate change itself, because they won't even say climate change out loud in any of our policies.
Yeah, they do literally have a policy to not say climate change, or climate crisis, which is
It's called nuisance flooding.
Yeah, I saw your hand.
Oh, I had a comment about that. I don't know if this is actually like a bill that, like you said, is going to be enforceable or not. And if it is, I guess it really wouldn't make a difference. But another thing about this is that this trafficking, the trafficking isn't going to stop. Even if there was a bill 10 years prior that was enacted, it doesn't really matter because that's not the issue. The issue is only that certain people can't transport undocumented people into the state of Florida or anywhere else. It's kind of the same thing with basically any other law that we have. It's only certain people that can't do things, and then other people have the free range, so to speak, to do it. So this doesn't necessarily stop any of this. It just changes who gets targeted for it, as opposed to like, oh no, this is an issue of morality. It's not an issue of morality. It's just an issue of, well, these people can't do it, but if you have enough money or influence or whatever, then this is it. Because like you said, undocumented immigrants in a lot of ways are the backbone, not only of Florida's economy, but really the economy of the United States and the Western world at large. Maybe not in Europe, in Western Europe, and I don't know about Australia, but certainly here, and we are the most powerful country and the biggest economy by no comparison.
Absolutely.
I'm just a comment. I really hope that people are afraid to go to work and that all these farms shut down and all the people who are paying people to put these policies in place are now sitting there with a farm full of dead, crops that are unpickable and they lose their businesses. And I know that that's gonna kill a lot of our economy, but I think it's only gonna be when we get to the point where there is no, so the developers that are paying for all this bad stuff that are also part of the corruption, they have nobody to work.
Yeah.
You can't build anything.
They're trying to out-corrupt each other. They're just bringing each other down.
Exactly. I think that it might actually have to come to that while all of this is going through the court system. And then people just say, well, I can't show up to work, so nobody's working. And then they're gonna realize, oh, that's maybe not such a good idea.
To get a little wonkier about it, right? Unemployment is at like all-time lows.
Yeah.
They're not taking jobs away from anybody. That everyone's dead, right? Right.
And nobody wants those jobs.
I mean, we live in a society where labor is sacrosanct, right?
Yeah.
I personally believe that labor is sacrosanct, right? Like I love my job, I love to work, and I believe that all labor is sacrosanct, right? I don't know why proponents of bills like this are so afraid of work. Right? I don't know why they're so afraid of people going to work and people doing things that contribute to everybody's well-being.
They're using people as political pawns. This is just for politics.
Yeah, they're hurting people for the sake of putting on a show.
It's like
And that's
building
why
a wall type of
when
thing.
a lot of my friends are saying like, I'm moving away, my first thought is, you need to do what's best for you and your family. But my second thought is, this is the front lines right here.
Yeah.
This is where I want to be. If I'm an organizer, if I'm a community leader, if I plan on running for office, because the world is watching what America is doing. We have Trump, DeSantis, and Bolsonaro all right here. And this is the, if you look at the culmination of how conservative rhetoric is compounding upon itself. Unfortunately, Florida is going to be the guinea pig for when these policies are actually enacted in Texas, but it's not helping them. Long term, I mean, when you look at polling, when you look at the data, it's hurting them. it's just a race for who can get as many headlines as possible, who can get as many power as possible, but it's a sinking mechanism in their strategy, and it's just stupidity. But people are profiting off of all the games.
If somebody somewhere is making money.
Yeah. Oops. Oh my god. Okay.
Okay.
Waste. So let's talk about waste. Oh, this one.
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, we need to breathe. Breathe it. Okay, you want to talk about this one? Because this one I did not know about until I was talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
I did not know.
So we call this the radioactive roads.
I saw it online, I thought it was a joke.
Yeah, no, it's real.
It's real.
It's 100% real. So they have, I believe the actual bill title is literally just use of phosphogypsum. It's something that who in here knows what phosphogypsum is? Yeah, oh, one, right. That doesn't sound like anything that interesting. So phosphogypsum is slightly radioactive. It is the way that this works. They want to be able to, what this does is it creates a study to look at using phosphogypsum in our roads. The EPA at the moment says you can't do that because some people are saying, yeah, the EPA says that you can't do that. What they're basically doing is they're looking at the use of this in the event that the EPA changes their minds. So they're trying to get their footwork done so that if something happens, maybe a SCOTUS decision, maybe somebody else becomes president and repeals the rule. That's what they want to do. Now, phosphogypsum itself is not the only radioactive item in phosphogypsum, right? There are trace elements of like other toxic and heavy metals, and there are other radioactive elements such as uranium, radon, polonium. Our lobbyist Dave Cullen likes to point out.
Water.
Yeah, our lobbyist Dave Cullen likes to point out. We got into a very nerdy conversation around this. Polonium, if folks don't remember, there was a man named Sergei Skripal in London. Sergei Skripal was a critic of the Russian government. Sergei Skripal was killed with polonium. That's what they used to poison him. They are putting, the way Dave Cullen, our lobbyist, loves to put it, I have to give him credit for this because I didn't come up with this, is they are putting spy poison in the roads.
Right.
So yeah, it's a...
So I think phosphorus mining is our third largest export.
Yes,
And
yes.
so this is the byproduct
Yes.
of that mining. With, I think, Piney Point, if you guys remember, Piney Point was
Full of this stuff.
full of this stuff, and it basically broke, and all of it leached into the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And I mean, hundreds of millions of gallons of this stuff, and it just created a lot of water quality issues. So that caused a lot of controversy. And now I suspect that they need a place to take this mining byproduct of poison and put it somewhere. And if the EPA is stepping in and saying you have to really regulate your landfills, then why not use it in our roads?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They need to put it somewhere and make money. Do you have?
Answer my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They need to make money and to do away with a byproduct that won't hurt anyone.
Yeah, I believe what one of the representatives supporting this thing said was like, oh, there's phosphogypsum in the road in front of me, and nobody's turning to the Hulk. It's like, oh yeah.
So funny. And I would suspect that the Department of Transportation is one of the few arms of the government that they could actually get away with doing this.
Possibly. I'm not gonna.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not an attorney, so I'm not gonna comment on the. Yeah.
I'm just suspecting that when they were sitting around looking at how they could actually pull this off, they were like, the Department of Transportation, now we're already using toxic chemicals for our roads, so let's just lump it all in together. That sounds great. Yeah. Those are the apologies. So, so right now, Orange County is undergoing its comprehensive planning process called Vision 2050. They're looking at our code, they're looking at basically the way that we develop and build here and how we legislate here on a local level, and they're basically updating the code, right? So right now, I have a greenhouse in my house, right? Per our code, there's no definition of what a greenhouse is, so I could get a code violation because I have a greenhouse and we don't really know, it's not in the code, there's no reference. So they have to update the code so that I don't get a code violation for something like a compost pile, because 30 years ago, people didn't have compost piles all over the place, or at least they didn't take the time to define it in our code. Well, the comprehensive planning process is usually a very public thing that we work on with our elected officials together. And it's something that we look at for future growth. We make sure that as we grow, we do have access to clean water. We make sure as we grow, we are conserving forests and that we're building density where density makes sense. And we're thinking about what our kids' future will look like. So every 20 to 30 years, they redo this comprehensive planning process.
Yeah, and what this does is it simultaneously strengthens the ability of those with means, right? I believe that typically we think of like developers and landlords are the ones that benefit from this, but technically anybody that has a lot of money, and it limits the ability of the average person to be able to engage in this process. When we talk about local freedom and we talk about local governments, right, I feel like that sounds like this like amorphous, the man type situation. Right, it's just people all the way up, right? It's a community of folks like us here, right? I don't know if folks have ever been to like a local like forum or like a local city council meeting. It's a little more regimented and nice if they have the nice dais, but it's kind of similar to what's going on here, right? It's just a bunch of people in a room talking about the issues. It's just people, and what they're doing is they are trying to make sure that certain people have more power than others, right? They are very much interfering with the local freedom of communities to advocate for a comprehensive plan that benefits them, while putting the power in the hands of those that have means.
So right now, what does that look like for Orange County? Well, who knows where Lake Nona is? Who knows about the Split Oak Forest fight? Yeah, I'm the crazy tortoise lady. I was the one waving the sign. Well, the whole fight of the toll road going through Split Oak was because we knew that the Lutheran Church of Latter-day Saints, or I don't remember, but anyway, Deseret Ranch and Lake Nona, these are hundreds of thousands of acres of property that are far outside the urban corridor, that are all basically slated to be developed, right? We as constituents of this county, we don't want more traffic on our roads. We don't want people coming here and living in $600,000 homes and using our roads and not paying impact fees so that we have more money to actually take care of our long-term maintenance of our roads. But these folks are not gonna, they're just building house after house, ticky-tack houses that all look the same, without having access to commerce or anything like that. So we're losing a lot with all this sprawl and growth and development. And now, the state is saying, even if you wanted to, local government, local mayor, I'm gonna shackle your arms behind your back and make it so that you can't deny these developers what they want, which is to just ravage your natural lands and suck up as much water as they want and use your roads as much as they want and not have to pay into the overall system. And if you try to pass like a moratorium to slow down growth or try to challenge any of these terrible, sprawling communities in any way, you as a local government will also have to pay the attorney fees of these developers, which basically will just shackle a local government's ability to say anything to fight these bad developments.
And I think we all often forget, right? The money that the local government has isn't like something where like, I don't know, they weren't like Rockefeller's child and have like a bunch of natural wealth that they came into. That's your money. You're paying for it every time you buy a Snickers bar at the grocery store, right?
No, I was gonna elaborate on that, but I don't want to interrupt you, but.
No, that was the end of my.
Oh, I was gonna say that, yeah, it's the same thing like, it was during the pandemic when everyone was concerned about certain counties running out of money. It's because the counties, yeah, their money doesn't come from the federal government or what have you. It comes from the people spending money in the county and living there, being a part of the community. So like you were saying, yeah, they don't have, that's all their budget is, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could theoretically legislate it differently if they want to, but currently that's the way it was. And that was the concern at the time the pandemic was, is that, yeah, certain communities were gonna just run out of money, and then they would have to do something in order to offset that.
And even if their money's coming from the state or federal government, it's still your money, right? Yeah.
And now you have no say.
Before you split to that one, Lee, I just wanted to make mention of the fact that the exception that we can get to this is if the Florida Right to Clean Water gets on the ballot and of course passes, then because it's a constitutional right, it sits higher than all this legislation. So all the bad stuff, including SACIT, which is the EPA no longer recognizing half the wetlands, all of that stuff would be preempted. So they're preempting us locally, but we would be preempting the entire legislation in Florida because we would be above that. And so it wouldn't necessarily limit development, but if we could prove that it was either threatened harm to water or proven harm to water, then we could prevent that, and that would again take precedence over this.
Yeah, and one little reminder, these developers, most of them don't even live in the country. A lot of them, they're like the top CEOs of these firms, like a lot of them live abroad. They could care less if we don't have clean drinking water, as long as they're making a profit. Which brings us to probably, I think, this is the worst one.
Yeah.
I think this is the worst one that I've ever seen. This is the one that gives me nightmares.
Yeah. So, I know, so going back to the idea of local freedom, same thing right here. What this does is it makes it a lot easier for a private business to sue a local government, municipality, county government, etc., if they think that an ordinance is going to negatively impact their profits. This is a slightly more watered down version of some stuff we saw last year. So it was supposed to be worse, and we killed it. I've seen bills similar to this in other states. The reason being, I'm from Colorado. There was a time that there was a ballot initiative that would have done something very similar to this, and we shot it down. And the big reason we shot it down is that something similar happened in Washington. I think it was Washington, might have been Oregon, one of those two. Pacific Northwest, it's all the same. The only state that matters is Florida. No. Right, they tried to do it. A couple of years after they passed it, they immediately started cutting back because it was disastrous. It prevented, right, think of all the things that your local government does.
Yeah, let me give an example.
Yeah.
So we, here at the local level, we passed a retail pet store ban because we were seeing a lot of these puppies in puppy mills carrying contagions and being just like harvested like cattle in a way that caused a lot of disease and a lot of issues. And people were taking out loans to adopt these dogs from like Petco and stuff like that from these retailers. And then like the dog would die immediately because it was super sick and they couldn't recoup like those thousands of dollars. So there was a lot of issues. We just passed this retail pet store ban. It was great. All these animal advocates came out. That's again, more time, more of your tax dollars going to lawyers, more of your commissioner's time going back and forth with all these lobbyists and private interest groups. Only for now, if a new retail pet store came here and started selling these dogs and we wanted to say, hey, we have this ordinance, you're not allowed to do that, they now can challenge you and as a local government and say, you're basically hurting X percentage of my profit margins, so I'm gonna take you to court and you're gonna basically in this court process be liable for my attorney's fees. And it's not just them, it's every single retail pet store can sue for different reasons. So I brought that up for the fertilizer, which they went ahead and did their own. We passed that. Every single landscaping company could try and sue our local government and try to recoup their profits that they lose in the summer and basically try to leave the county on the hook for their fees. So it scares these smaller governments from being able to hold their own ordinances accountable in their communities.
Yeah, and I mean, right, when you really think about what a government does, the overwhelming majority of what you recognize as government is the local government, right? If a fire starts in your home, fire department, that's local government. Right, somebody broke into your house, you call the local government. Right, who makes sure that, this example doesn't really work here, but in Colorado, right, we have a lot of snow. Who cleans up the roads? The local government cleans up the roads, makes sure that you can get to work nice and safe. Right, most of your interaction about your safety, your health, your well-being is the local government. And this attempts to prevent your local government from doing what you need it to do.
And I was really shocked about this one because right now, as you guys see, DeSantis is basically making companies like promise to commit campaign contributions in order for him to like do something for them in return. To quote The Dark Knight, if you're good at something, never do it for free. Why on earth are they basically just opening the floodgates for all the private interests in Florida to have at it and just run rampant, you know, when they could be doing something even more corrupt and making them pay campaign contributions to get a bill like this through? It's basically selling the soul of Florida to private interest groups all throughout the state.
I just have a comment. I don't know. You don't have to respond necessarily.
That was a leap period back.
Yes, you don't have to respond to it, but it might just be that they're not really worried about that because Florida, as was mentioned earlier, is a peninsula, and despite being one of the major functionaries, or I'm not sure what the word is, of the national economy, so like with California, Texas, Florida, and Pennsylvania, and a couple others. So, they may not really care, surprised, and they just they may be already accepting that Florida at some point in the next 50, 100 years is not going to be really inhabitable, so it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
You know, just
Thank
take
you.
all the money and then they can.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that the CEOs of certain companies don't live here, but even if they did live here, they would just leave. Because they still have means, right? They still have wealth and influence.
So I really appreciate you saying that because it's really hard for me to say that out loud because I'm supposed to be the one that guides people to hope and makes people feel excited. But when I first started my career, I was doing conservation work out in the Seminole County Natural Lands Program. And I wanted to be in the woods, counting gopher tortoise burrows and doing controlled burns for the rest of my life. I was like, I'm in my little like off-roader and I'm just like chilling. And the amount of development that I saw and the amount of roadkill that I saw made me so infuriated. And it all hit me at once. That these people don't care if we have full ecological collapse, as long as they're making their money. And it was that moment that I said, enough is enough. I don't care if I die fighting and I don't have a chance, I'm changing my entire career and I'm getting into this work.
Or not even that, they may even just already know. I mean, they mentioned earlier, someone mentioned BP, but the oil companies and the major oil companies in this country have known about climate change. Exxon was in the 70s, and then there's even reports that the ones before that, what is it, Humboldt Oil or something? I can't remember. New in the 50s, so it's not inconceivable that this would be something that they've already known, or at least within the last 40 years or so, since the 80s, when it became apparent in certain circles. Maybe not in a national sense, but.
And let me add something on businesses real quick. Plenty of small businesses hate this bill. I think it gets missed. It gets missed in the conversation because we're talking about these corporations. Right. Not everybody believes in it, but in a capitalist economy, competition is the lifeblood of everything. This does not make the economy more competitive.
Yeah.
Right. This does quite the opposite. Right. Small mom and pop bakery doesn't have the ability to hide returns, right? You're barely breaking even. This is the big corporations. This is a deeply anti-competitive bill, right? Plenty of small businesses have told us, I play by the rules, right? I don't want to hand the power to the people that don't care to play by the rules, right? I compete, I play by the rules, I contribute to my local economy in a meaningful way. I don't want to hand things off to those that don't, and that's what this does.
Well, at least we scared away all the migrants, right?
Yeah,
That's
no,
what, like, that's
no
what people are
workforce.
thinking, like, when they're voting, they're going to the
Right.
polls, they're like, oh, my biggest threat are these people that are coming here that don't look like me, don't speak like me.
Right.
We gotta get them out. It's like, you have these people who are actively stealing your rights,
Yeah.
and you're not looking at whether or not your legislator is holding them accountable at all.
Yeah, you're right. They're chasing away our workforce. They're chasing away small businesses. They're chasing away your ability to, live your life.
And our
Oh,
last
right.
slide. Joe Biden! Dark brain.
So to touch on something positive, I should have put a title slide. This snuck up on me. So to touch on something positive that's really going to be a focus of what the Sierra Club does for probably the next few years, the Inflation Reduction Act, right? So this is nearly $400 billion going to clean energy and conservation efforts. And you can see where the investments are by sector here. But if you could go to the next, I should have grabbed the clicker. Yeah. So, however, the thing is that even with these billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars being invested into our local economies and into our state economies for green projects, there's still kind of a lot of work that needs to be done. And so we constantly get this question, how much money does that mean for Florida? And unfortunately, I don't have a very specific answer for you. That's because it's a little nuanced. So first off, IRA funds aren't automatically pumped into our economy, right? State governments, state entities, local governments, local entities, businesses, homeowners, etc. They have to apply for this money in a variety of different ways, right? Some of it's managed by EPA, some of it's managed by DHS, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And so for Florida at the moment, we're looking at about tens of millions of dollars allocated to local governments. We've been predominantly focused on local governments and the amount of money that they are applying for. So it's tens of millions of dollars.
That local governments can apply for directly to the federal government.
Right.
So they can skip over the fascist regime and
Right.
go up to the federal level and apply for these dollars.
Yeah. They say, Uncle Joe, give me some cheddar.
Yeah.
So, right, however, if the state government and state entities, more local governments and local entities, small businesses, homeowners, etc., all apply for all of the money that's available to them, that's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Florida's economy for sustainable economic goods, right? We're talking those hundreds of small businesses and tens of thousands of solar jobs that we were talking about, more, right? Your solar, more money to help you make sure that you can put that solar on your rooftop, right? Jobs, right? Somebody's got to put the solar on there. That's work, right? Yeah, we're getting rid of all the workers apparently, but that's hundreds of millions of dollars invested into our state economy, right? You look like you had a comment now.
No,
Oh.
I'm just so excited.
Yeah. However, and I don't mean this, however, in like a negative sense. This is all very positive. This is all great. But as we've highlighted here, right, it's going to take some work because each and every single one of those entities have to apply. And so we have some organizing challenges, right? We have an unprecedented implementation challenge on something like this. This has never happened before. The federal government themselves have been trying to figure out how exactly to handle this. We are a very large national entity. We've been trying to figure out how to handle this because there are over 400 funding streams. I tried to memorize some of the highlights of the IRA, and for folks wondering what the IIJA is, that's the bipartisan infrastructure deal. So, right, 400 funding streams. That's going to flow to state governments in some ways, in certain grant programs, and certain forms and certain things they have to apply to from different entities. Some of that's going to flow to local governments in ways that they have to apply for. Some of that's going to go to homeowners, right, in the form of like tax credits, etc. Some of that's going to go to small businesses. That's really complicated. And as you can see, right, each program comes with different timelines, a different entity overseeing it, different rules for how you can apply for it. And plenty of state and local governments have no idea what's available to them. It takes, these are very complex legal documents, and you need like a team of attorneys to understand the world's going on there. Not every local government has the ability to do that.
And you need full-time grant writers.
Yeah.
You need, I mean, we're very lucky here in Orlando and in Orange County where we've had enough tourism dollars and enough sales tax dollars to like really boost our local economy through the tourism here. But ultimately, like the more you go out and you witness how other local governments on a smaller scale and more rural areas function, some of them still use like paper maps to do their comprehensive planning process. I mean, these are folks that are like pinching pennies just to function, and you're asking them now to tap into very rigorous application processes in order to pull down funds from the federal government. And it's a huge ask, even though the money is good and it's there.
Kind of going back, it kind of reflects back on some of the earlier stuff that we were mentioning, right? Imagine if those governments then have to pay attorneys a bunch of money instead of spending that money on you.
Right.
But anyways.
But there's nonprofits that help connect resources and they're the liaison between.
Yeah, and we're kind of figuring out where we fit into that at the Sierra Club. And our main strength is organizing, so that's what we know about, right? These are some of the challenges that we have ahead. Particularly because, again, going back to this environmental justice thing, a lot of these resources need to go to communities of high need, right? When we talk about weatherization, for folks who don't know what weatherization is, we're talking about making homes a little more resilient to adverse weather events, right? There are very specific communities in Florida that need that money the most, right? Flood-prone communities in Miami, right, and on the coasts are communities that can't necessarily afford to weatherize their homes, and we need to make sure that investment goes to them. And we need to make sure that the actual outcomes that come out of this implementation are the outcomes that we wanted to happen, right? We passed this big, massive investment that's going to come from our dollars, right? We'll see if the debt limit goes through this evening and whether or not we still have that money. Right, we wanted that money to go towards specific programs and have a specific outcome. That was making sure that our economy was better, that we had more jobs, and that we were creating a green and sustainable future for our country. We need to make sure that actually happens, right? There are certain provisions in the IRA that allow for fracked gas. We need to make sure that not a single dime goes to the fracked gas industry, right? That's expensive for you, that's expensive for me, that's expensive for our children, that's expensive for the future. We need to make sure that we are actually getting green and sustainable outcomes. And that's going to require a lot of education, it's going to require a lot of work, it's going to require a lot of organizing.
Yeah.
That's all I have on IRA, I think.
And that's it.
Can you back up a second?
Yeah.
I've been trying to follow this money. I work with Citizens Climate Lobby, so we're along the same lines as far as the IRA. That's like one of our main focuses. In fact, energy is electrification and energy conservation. What you're talking about, upgrading your homes to, weatherizing. But one of the things that I'm most concerned about, I'm sure that you're concerned about with Florida Rising, is the $9 billion that is earmarked in the IRA for disadvantaged communities, specifically for rebates for electrifying, going from gas to electric, and insulating their homes and upgrading their electric panels, all the things they can do to go electric. So a lot of it, like you just said, is coming down through grants, and luckily in Orlando and every big metropolitan area, we have plenty of people that can handle that. But I just heard today from a recording that the $9 billion for disadvantaged communities is going to come down through the state energy department. Have you heard that?
No.
Have you heard that?
No.
That the state energy, because people have to qualify for it. They have to be low income, disadvantaged communities. They have to show that they're upgrading their appliances. They're not just using the money to buy a new stove because they want a new stove, so it has to be, everything has to be vetted. So whenever you find out, and I've been talking to people in the city to ask them too, because they don't know either, everybody's like, you know, looking up stuff to fall out of the sky with this particular $9 billion.
Yep.
So I want to be up with you guys educating communities on how to apply for those funds when it becomes available, because $9 million nationwide isn't gonna last for 10 years.
So we're doing that directly. We're knocking on doors and talking to individuals and helping to pass out resources for like housing rehabilitation programs or different retrofits, like energy retrofits, different programs that are already established. But we're also working hand in hand with local municipalities to educate them about this as well. I met with the town of Eatonville. They're one of the last Black incorporated municipalities here. There used to be 60 across the nation, now there's only 20 left, and we have one historic community right in our backyard that, you know, they don't have a full-time grant writer. They don't really have someone who's actively lobbying them to educate them about what they could be tapping into. And so we're trying to fill that gap and connect them to some of these nonprofits that will literally walk them through that process. But there's so much more to do.
I don't think they're gonna need grants. I think it's gonna be where they go to a store and they say, okay, I think I qualify for this. I should get a rebate, and the store is gonna be motivated to get this money for them too. Just like now, they just modified the rebates for electric cars where the dealer can actually give you your discount up front. You don't have to wait till the end of the year to get your tax return. So, we want to get the bottom line on what's happening with the state energy department, which is understaffed. You know, they just got a new director. The director doesn't know anything. So, you know, the state energy department is really, I think, the key to focus on. The money's going to come through them, and they have to be able to say, this is how you're going to apply for it.
Yeah, so final calls to action, and then Kristen, if you wanted to promote any future events, please check your registration and make sure you're registered to vote. Please make sure that if you're used to voting by mail, that you reapply for your vote by mail ballot, because they're stripping that from us. Please make sure that you're having these conversations with your friends and family, and you're helping to politely agitate those relationships so they can become more politically aware and engaged. And please join an organization, Sierra Club, Florida Rising, Ideas for Us, Citizens Climate Lobby, and get engaged. Talk to these folks, figure out how you can plug in, and sign our Right to Clean Water petition and our access to abortion petition as well, which I'll pass out at the end. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot more that you can say. This is the last slide, so I'll just kind of finish off with saying, like, thank you both so much for educating us. And honestly, I feel so encouraged just having you both out in the field and fighting this fight. It's a lot. That's a lot. But you know, I just feel, you know, empowered by the fact that you guys are doing this and y'all are here to kind of join this effort. Like that's the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess. But you know, these are long fights. These are long efforts. So if you just want to take actionable items, I can offer you that. So follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and join us in our eco action. But it takes these efforts and those efforts. So thank you guys again. Thank you all for coming.
You know what? Activism is sexy. You can be cool, you can be out in the community talking about things that you care about. It doesn't have to be scary, it's very approachable. This time last year, I didn't know anything about policy. But the more I got into it, the more I started to inspire people, the more I became inspired by their energy and so on. So it's the gift that keeps on giving.